Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. Hey there, how you doing? Thanks for checking back in for another edition of This Day in Sports History. It's April 19th, and on this day, well, sort of on this day in 1981, it was the longest baseball game in history. So I say sort of because the game started the day before on the 18th. And it wasn't completed until June 23rd, but it did come to a temporary halt in the early morning hours of the 19th. This was a AAA International League game between the Rochester Red Wings and the Pawtucket Red Sox. The start of the game was delayed for more than half an hour due to issues with the stadium lights, so the first pitch was not delivered until 8 p.m. on the 18th. And the 1,700 fans in the stands and the players on the field were not aware of the odyssey that they were about to embark upon. Rochester took a 1-0 lead into the bottom of the ninth, but after a sac fly scored a run for the Red Sox, the game was headed to extra innings. And from there, the game dragged on and on. It was also cold in Rhode Island that evening. It wasn't warm when the game started, and the temperature continued to drop throughout the evening. As the game dragged on into the early morning hours, players resorted to burning wooden bats in an attempt to stay warm, and after the bats that they could burn ran out, they peeled off pieces of the wooden benches to keep the fires going. And the wind was blowing in pretty stiffly, which had an effect on the scoring. Several well-hit balls that would have otherwise been home runs were long outs instead. And another thing, all leagues had a curfew. In fact, the International League's curfew was 12:45, but the rule book that the home plate umpire had in his pocket did not list that anywhere, or at least anywhere that he could find, and so the game played on and on. In the 21st inning, the tie was finally broken with Rochester scoring in the top half. However, leave it up to future Hall of Famer Wade Boggs to come up in the bottom half of the inning with a man in scoring position and tie it up with a base hit RBI to extend the game. Even Boggs' teammates let out audible groans that the game was tied up again. Boggs said when he got back to the dugout, he felt like his teammates wanted to slug him instead of hug him. And so the game continued, tied at 2 into the 32nd inning. By this point, it was 4 a.m., and the players, along with the 19 fans who were left, were getting tired and a bit delirious. Pawtucket's general manager reached out to the International League commissioner, alerting him that the game was still in progress, which horrified the commissioner, and he said that the game should be halted at the completion of the next inning. So at 4:07 a.m. at the end of the 32nd inning, after a little more than 8 hours, the game was paused, tied at 2. As the bleary-eyed players headed home to grab some sleep before an 11 a.m. first pitch later that morning for Game 3 of the series, they passed early rising church-going folks headed to Easter sunrise services. So, it was suggested that the completion of this game actually take place before they started their scheduled Sunday game, but Rochester's manager asked for it to be delayed due to risk of injury. So instead, the teams finished this one out on June 23rd when the Red Wings returned to Pawtucket. The game only took another 18 minutes to finish, with the Red Sox getting the winning run in the bottom of the 33rd inning. This game set numerous records, obviously, including longest game by innings, 33, and time, 8 hours, 25 minutes. There were a couple of guys who despite double-digit plate appearances, went hitless. Rochester's Dallas Williams had the most futility in this game, going 0 for 13 in 15 trips to the plate. But Russ Larrabee of the Paw Sox deserves a mention. He went 0 for 11, striking out 7 times, becoming the first player in history to achieve what's called the titanium sombrero, or striking out more than 6 times in a game. Pawtucket used 8 pitchers, with Bobby Ojeda picking up the win. Also on this day, in 1897, the first Boston Marathon was run. Now, the idea for the race came from John Graham, who was the U.S. Olympic team manager at the time and had witnessed the inaugural marathon run in Athens during the 1896 Olympics. Graham, along with Herbert Holton, designed a 24.5-mile course. 15 runners started on this day and 10 finished, with New York's John McDermott winning with a time of 2 hours, 55 minutes, 10 seconds. Despite walking a few miles in the final portion, he still won by nearly 7 minutes. It was McDermott's second marathon win in the U.S., having won the only other race of that distance in New York the previous year. It wasn't until 1908 that the distance was stretched out to the current standard of 26 miles, 385 yards. And in 1986, it was the Vindication in Vegas heavyweight fight between Larry Holmes and Michael Spinks. These two had fought the previous September, with Spinks giving Holmes his first career loss in a unanimous decision. Even so, Holmes came into this one as an 8-5 favorite to reclaim his title. And from the opening bell, it looked like he would take it back quickly and not allow ringside judges an opportunity to decide the fight. He hurried out of his corner and was the aggressor, and perhaps a little too aggressive. After throwing 2 punches, Holmes grabbed Spinks like a wrestler and threw him to the canvas, drawing a rebuke from referee Mills Lane. Holmes kept going after Spinks, but he wasn't able to do much damage, and he began to tire out. Spinks started punching back in the 8th round and dominated the middle to late rounds. But with about a minute left in the 14th round, Holmes connected with a right hand and the lights dimmed considerably for Spinks, wobbling for a step and nearly going down before he regained his footing. But surprisingly, Holmes, who was adamant about not letting this fight go to the judges, let Spinks recover. After landing another right, a visibly stunned Spinks wandered around the ring, but Holmes didn't attack. And when the bell sounded at the end of the round, Spinks was able to recover in his corner for the final round. And after the fight ended, the ringside announcers all believed Holmes had won the rematch. But there was a hint that since the fight was in Nevada, funny things can happen. And it did. Michael Spinks was announced as the winner in a split decision to retain his IBF heavyweight title and remain undefeated. It was revealed later that Holmes had broken his right thumb in the 3rd round, and yet continued on. Holmes announced his retirement in November, but he did return to the ring a few years later and continued boxing until he fought his last fight in 2002 at the age of 52. And time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? Riding your bike on a street anywhere in the state of Illinois? Well, then you should know it's illegal to ride without hands on the bars or feet on the pedals. That's all for today. And hey, looking for something to occupy the next 30 seconds of your day? How about leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts? That would be greatly appreciated by me, your humble host. Thanks for stopping by today, and I'll talk to you tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.